New alarm bells ringing tonight on the coronavirus outbreak in this country.
Doctors say the virus is spread through droplets when someone coughs or sneezes.
And I think the business community, it's in their interest that people actually stay home and stop the spread.
For a business that can allow more employees to telecommute, we want you to do that.
In these times, what does it mean to sell with purpose? How can you bring intention to every sales conversation, no matter what you're selling? What if success doesn't mean just one more closed sale, but one more life saved? Hi, friends. I'm Andy Paul, host of the Sales Enablement Podcast, and this is Selling with Purpose, a special 6-part series of inspiring conversations exploring what it means to sell with a mission greater than just hitting your numbers in the era of COVID-19 and beyond. Tune in to hear from world-class enterprise sales leaders and learn how their 6 companies will close $50 billion selling remotely. See how they've supported essential workers with the products and services they need to stay safe and thrive during this time of crisis. A special thank you to our guests and their incredible companies, Sodexo, Henry Schein, Gordon Food Services, NFP, Stanley Security, and CDK for allowing us to share their stories. All right, let's get into it. Ty, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Andy. I really appreciate you having me.
So where are you locked down these days?
I'm calling in from beautiful Austin, Texas today.
Very nice. Very nice. Makes me hungry for the Salt Lick.
You know what? It's the one thing that, thank goodness, that Salt Lick did not close down, and the to-go orders were plentiful. So,
well, how about Franklin's?
A little too far of a drive for me, but
okay, all right.
we can't turn this into a barbecue debate, Andy. Okay, because I think Salt Lick is still champion.
Well, I love the Salt Lick. I mean, so you're out near Driftwood?
I am. I'm actually in a little town called Wimberley, Texas. So right outside of Driftwood. So we're extremely close.
Oh, yeah. You know, I would weigh 1,000 pounds if I lived in Austin.
That's why we're doing this audio only, okay, and not a video chat this morning.
Last time my wife and I were there, it's like, you know, there's too much good food in Austin, starting with Salt Lake, and we were just like, oh yeah, this would be bad if we were here. We couldn't exercise enough. If we lived there, we just couldn't couldn't exercise enough to keep the weight off.
That's not such a bad thing, but yeah, no, it's great, and we're fortunate to have it so close and to be in such a great city.
Yeah, and there's not to turn this into a food show, but there's this local, I think, small chain of sort of breakfast cafes that have the gingerbread pancakes they're famous for.
You know, I think it's Kirby Lane.
Yes,
so you've
Kirby
got,
Lane.
Oh yeah. We're never going to get on the breakfast food, Andy. So it's a whole nother show.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, just a sample of the last trip. You could see why we put on a few pounds while we were there. So tell us a little bit about Henry Schein, because this is a company that's people come into contact with one way or another that they're probably not aware of if they go to a dentist office, for instance.
Yeah, so Henry Schein is the world's largest distributor of medical and dental products. We at one point had an animal health vertical that we divested last year. Now it's operating under the name of Covetrus, and so Henry Schein specializes in the office-based practitioner. So when you look at our market share from a dental perspective, support a tremendous amount of single dentist practices as well as large DSOs or dental service organizations, and very similar on the medical side, which is what I'm a part of. We service a tremendous amount of the independent practices, surgery centers, and large integrated delivery networks, hospital-owned health systems. So a wide variety of segments that we focus on, but primarily really focus our distribution efforts on that office-based practitioner.
Interesting. So in terms of what's sort of happening today with COVID-19 and so on, have you pivoted at all with supplying PPE and other things that hospitals need to to support that, or are you still focused on the office?
No, I would say that during COVID, and as a number of states were shutting down and sheltering in place, we did have a large number of our independent practices, both on the dental and medical side, that unfortunately did close down during that time. We had a segment of our business from an urgent care perspective that remained open. And so a majority of the items that, throughout that time were heavily focused on PPE. But the last few weeks, we have started to see, a surge in products outside of PPE, which is certainly, refreshing to see. So we distribute a number of product categories. So when we start to see more of those categories start to certainly to be distributed, it's certainly looking like business is back to usual in some areas. So still have a ways to go. Right now we're looking at a variety of projects that we're working on with our customers to jumpstart activity. But it's certainly refreshing just to be able to see certainly what some of the demand is outside of PPE, because we still continue to run into certain situations regarding product categories that are still hard to procure at this time.
So I imagine, because I got a note from my dentist a couple of weeks ago saying, yeah, we're going to be opening up, and but it's completely different, right? And I'm just wondering whether you've had to sort of bring on new products in the mix, because they're talking about we're going to have one patient at a time in the office, almost, it sounded like, right? We're going to keep you down on your car until we're ready to bring you up. And I was just wondering what you're seeing in terms of how that affects these individual practices.
Without question, I think it's going to have a fundamental impact on what we have experienced thus far, whether we're seeing the dentist or medical professional. You're obviously looking at, the waiting room experience, right? Look at the emergence of telehealth and the adoption rate of telehealth in a post-COVID world. I mean, a lot of technology that's been around for some times, but, we'll just say slow to adapt. You're starting to see, more social acceptance of. So, I from a product standpoint, I would say that what we have found to be extremely beneficial, through the efforts of a number of our Team Schein members, is really sourcing a lot of the PPE products from a number of manufacturers outside of some of the traditional partners that we've worked with, right? So, we've continued to provide our customers, with these PPE items and a number of options, right? So as some of the companies like Ford collaborated with 3M, we had the opportunity to distribute some of those items for PPE use as well. So continue to look for sourcing opportunities. But, to your point, I think the patient experience is going to look a lot different, certainly as offices begin to open back up, and certainly in the very near future. And so, I think that, it's not necessarily a bad thing, in the sense of the extra precautions that the healthcare professionals are taking. But, we certainly want to keep an eye on the supply associated with that for sure.
So let's talk about the impact that's been on your sales team. So how many people do you have on your sales team? You're in the West. You manage the Western United States, you said, for the medical side?
Yeah. So I'm vice president of sales for the Western U.S. And so under my leadership, roughly about 280 selling assets. Okay, that range from some of our traditional reps that are in their individual territories to some of our strategic account teams as well. So I have a counterpart in the Eastern U.S. that has a sales team roughly about that size.
And so I imagine most of them were field-based, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So how did, describe for us what that transition was for you to say, okay, everybody's going from the field, they're working from home now?
I think probably the biggest transition had to do with customer engagement, right? So all of our field-based reps work from home. And so, the transition to working from home, wasn't as big of a stretch for a lot of those individuals. We have a large number of internal Team Schein members that are working from home now. That, when some of the initial offices were closing and whatnot, we had to enact some work from home measures for them, which was a little bit of an adjustment. But for our field-based sales team, it's something that they're used to. I would say the biggest challenge, that each one of them had to manage through, was the lack of customer engagement on a weekly basis that they were used to, right? So everybody, for the most part, did continue to engage their customer in a virtual way. But that was probably the biggest adjustment.
Well, what about from a tool standpoint on your side in terms of being able to manage the team and their activities and so on?
We had to embrace a number of technologies, right? So it's today we utilize Microsoft Teams, for example, for a lot of the virtual conference calls that we normally have. But I early on, I think it was extremely important as a sales leader to stay engaged, with our teams in a virtual way, right? So utilizing, these types of technologies really just to get some of that face time, with your teams, right? To check in on them to make sure that everybody was coping and managing through this, and as much as you can that with the social distancing that was being encouraged, we wanted to find new ways to socially interact. And unfortunately, right as the state started to close, we were right in the midst of about to attend our national sales meeting, which is a great time for our team members to engage,
Right.
with each other. And so, I for the most part, having to bypass that this year for safety reasons, and then immediately go into the shelters in place that were in effect. The teams definitely missed that. So, in any opportunity that we could have to embrace some of the technology that's available to engage socially and virtually, we saw our teams certainly embrace.
And questions sort of interesting, just sort of in normal times, because you're supplying sales equipment to the medical and dental professions and I've seen this with other companies that service the healthcare side, is they feel a certain sense of mission in what they're doing. I was wondering, is that because they're helping, they know their products are directly helping people stay healthy and so on. Is that normally part of what your team, you sort of feel the team culture?
Without question. When you look at the five constituents that Henry Schein, that are part of the pillars of our success, and when the manufacturer community that we support and that we distribute for, and the customer and the Team Schein member, just really focusing on those three. During this time, I mean, the some of the greatest information that we provided to our customers, was just that, insights, right? If it was information coming from some of the manufacturing communities when products were limited, being able to respond to these customers' needs and the efforts of our sales team during this time were certainly commendable. There were national shortages of products that were very hard to come by, and so just responding to customers, and a lot of our sales teams, really took a hands-on approach to help and secure and procure products for them that were hard to come by. At that time, I mean, that customers had, true needs, to protect, their staff, to protect themselves. So, without question, I think during this time that we do have a greater sense of what we were doing, in the marketplace, and working with the manufacturers that were working as hard as they could to try and provide products available to us to ship to our customers. And during this time, I mean, just as states were empowered, as were a lot of organizations like Henry Schein, to work with our suppliers, work with the government on FEMA air bridge shipments that we were able to do to get product to our customers on the front line. So there were a number of I would say that protocols that we enabled to try and get product to the hot spots as best that we could, right, when inventory was available.
Well, part of the reason I asked the question about culture is having spent time researching the company and going through your website and so on, is that the culture. I mean, everybody talks about culture, but you guys really front and center talk about, hey, we've been recognized as the top workplace for equality and diversity, and I was just wondering, how deeply does that permeate throughout the organization?
From a leadership perspective, I mean, it's certainly from the top down, right? So Stanley Bergman, our chairman, does a tremendous job of empowering his leaders to make great decisions, from that perspective, and keeping that at the forefront of our culture. So we want to always continue to encourage it, and understand that joining Team Schein and being part of the Team Schein culture embodies a number of things, right? So it's just as much a concern for people as it is a concern for results. And a lot of that is certainly what was passed down from the Schein family that Stanley has continued to create and ensure is preserved, no matter how large the organization like Henry Schein has. So I would say that if the culture of Henry Schein and Team Schein is certainly one of the most distinguishable that's out there in the marketplace today. And frankly, when you ask a number of individuals, either why they join the organization or why they stay with the organization, it's because of the culture that is here at Henry Schein.
So sort of circling back, so how's that reflected in sort of the day-to-day sales culture of the company?
I think it's reflected in a number of ways, right? I look at the team members that were engaged in every exercise that we just went through. Whether they're internal team members working from home for the first time, supporting our external field reps, if it's our product category managers that are trying to procure products from sources outside of some of the traditional suppliers because of limitations and limited availability, it's everyone was working tremendous hours during this time, on weekends, during this time, to find solutions, to truly be identified as that trusted advisor. And, during this time, unfortunately, a large number of dentists were closed, right, with the exception of those that were facilitating emergency services. So, our dental counterparts, had to somewhat, sit back during this time and really focus more on the planning phase of when dentists were going to open back up. And so, a lot of best practices were shared, along the way as we began developing some of the strategies that we will now be utilizing, in this next phase of reopening. But I would say that certainly from a cultural perspective, it was embodied with whatever your role is within the organization was contributing, to the overall mission of certainly being that trusted advisor for our customers.
So as you look forward, and you're going, it sort of as an extension of what you're going through now, is how do you see your sort of go-to-market messaging changing or evolving?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the first things that we certainly anticipate and look at is, the possible resurgence of this, certainly this virus and infection coming back, right? So, what did we learn, throughout this time, that we can certainly leverage for our customers to be in a better position, to meet. And so I think that, to your point, that's what you're starting to see, with some of the protocols that are being enabled and certainly supported right now in terms of waiting rooms and social distancing and things along those lines. So, I would say that first off, it's what did we learn, throughout this in anticipation of it happening again. Right. I can certainly say that a priority for us is going to be continuing to see, to focus on the diagnostic testing. So, Henry Schein was one of the first companies to launch an antibody test, to the market. And we have a number of our supplier partners now that have come to market with certain diagnostic tests as well. So, I think we'll continue to see, focus on understanding the guidelines, right, that are being, promoted out there, regardless right. of our segmentation, right, to ensure that family practice and individual practices, as well as surgery centers up to the health systems, are fully aware of what the recommendations and guidelines are, and then understand what can we do to certainly ensure that that proper testing is enacted. So I think a big part of what we're looking at right now with a lot of our supplier partners, is really understanding the comorbidity and looking at, when you look at the number of individuals that, the impact that overall wellness had from a chronic disease standpoint, really understanding that, right? So, not just diagnosis of a COVID-19, but also really understanding the impact that it had, on some of the patients that suffered from more of those, chronic diseases, such as diabetes, right? So, when you look at the way in which we can help contribute, to the, I would say, the greater patient population that could be potentially impacted by this, falls back in line with what did we learn, right? So I think that's one of the things that we learned, that we can continue to introduce new technologies, new testing methodologies, to the market.
So thinking about your field sales force, because this is a question that talked about with a number of people recently is, okay, one of the questions is, well, geez, how do we start redeploying our people into the field? How do we help them feel safe doing that? And then on the flip side is on the customer side, when do they feel comfortable having outsiders come into their workplaces again? So what have you guys been thinking about that?
Yeah, great question. I first and foremost, when we look at the, certainly the health and wellness of our Team Schein members, we want to make sure that, that they're comfortable and that they have all the necessary, PPE items that they would need to have. So one of the things that we have worked on is really creating, PPE kits for our sales team that are going to be engaging customers, on a regular basis. And so we're in the process of distributing those to our team members that are going to be engaging, the frontline healthcare provider in the various states, and really following a lot of the guidelines that are being published by state, right? So I think that you've got, some practices that have already been open and remained open, want the level of engagement, but it certainly needs to meet, the safety criteria, whether that's, wearing the necessary PPE that we're providing to our team members, or meeting virtually during this time. So, I would say first and foremost, it is the well-being of our Team Schein members, right? And what can we provide them during this time? And then, of course, following, each and every state and guideline that's being published, and certainly the wishes of the practice. So, I think right now we're seeing a wide variety of what those expectations are that are varying from state to state.
Well, I think the tough thing is sort of the person-to-person aspect of it, right? Is I think you have people who have varying levels of comfort based on their own situation about going out and re-engaging.
Without question. Yeah. I mean, without question. And so we wanted, obviously I think our customers have been certainly more than supportive during this time of embracing every type of communication methodology that's out there, right? To ensure that we're staying in constant contact with them. And I it's not something that, that we're introducing, right? It's something that I think that, society-wise, I think we've all embraced it differently than what we normally would have. So, I think that's, certainly, when you start to look out at, our sales team that are communicating with their family members in this way, right? I mean, that communicating with customers, that they care just as deeply for, is something that we're seeing more and more of as well.
Yeah. So just so again, looking forward a little bit is for you is what have you learned possibly during this shutdown period? We redeployed your field team, as you said, sort of partially because they were working from home anyway, but certainly spending less time in the field. Is with the prospect of more virtual selling taking place, have you thought, maybe we need to change, I don't know, the profile of the person we need, or the skill sets of what they need, or we need to enable them in a different way than we have in the past? What have you been thinking along that lines?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I can say that it's still a little early, right? So when you look at where we're monitoring the states, and as each states are opening up and really looking, into the data to understand what we see, there's been a very heavy reliance on data to help us make decisions. Certainly from a sales leader's perspective, as far as the profile of our sales team member today, it certainly, technology has continued to play a big part of selling in any environment, right? I mean, when you look at how a sales professional today utilizes all the resources that are available, I think that it's certainly different than what it's looked like in years past, and going through an event like this certainly accelerates the adoption and the engagement at a different level as well. So I within the last year we've actually worked with Salesforce to introduce a lot of the CRM technology to our sales team members, and start utilizing that. So I think that certainly times like this, where there's been a little bit more time in the home office than previously, it's allowed us to to dig into that data a little bit, right? To utilize more of the resources that we have to kind of enable our sales team to go out there and prospect more. So it's a wide variety of the technology and the tools that are available. that during a time like this, I think that all of our sales assets have really started to focus on. But at the end of the day, that customer to customer, that interaction that our sales team thrives on, as I would probably say, is what we anticipate the most, right? To get back to and to experience, as a field-based sales organization that we have. I mean, that's what we thrive on, right? Is that customer interaction.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that share that sentiment. So last question for you is so are there different KPIs that you've been tracking now during this period than you did before? And what might those be that give you a different insight into what's happening?
Yeah, great question. I would say that early on, when you start to look at the our business, right, and you look at from a distribution perspective and all the different product categories, that we normally distribute. I mean, the sales mix that our team members, focus on, every day is, without question, one of the strengths, right? When you look at the sheer vastness of our portfolio and the number of supplier partners that we support, throughout this process, you're only seeing a small fraction of that sales mix start to come through, right? Which we're heavily focused on PPE, right? So, I would say some of the KPIs that we've really, stayed hyper focused on, certainly over the last few weeks, right, are some of those additional product categories outside of PPE, right? So from a forecasting perspective, I don't think we ever could have anticipated the sheer volume that we saw, with some of those items. And now that we're starting to see, states opening up and practices opening up and specialties that have been closed, and whether it's because of procedures that were put off until offices reopened, right, or utilizing PPE categories, within specialties that normally don't utilize those PPE. We've been learning along the way with that, right? So I would say right now, it's really truly understanding the nature, of our business from web ordering and technology ordering, perspectives, right, for our team members to really, understand what the business looks like and where those needs are coming from. So really trying to take a glimpse of the data coming from a number of sources,
Right.
and modeling that out to see, where is the activity and where do we need to increase demand within certain markets, for specific reasons. And it's helping us develop a lot of our go-to-market strategies in this post-COVID era, right, as we look to see, okay, this is what the data is telling us, right? And so what do we need to now focus on or double down on with regards to these efforts?
I wish it were the post-COVID era.
Well, and that's a good point. I mean, I would say it at least from the standpoint of the practices being opened, right? And so when you start to at least see that, that we went from a phase where, there was a lot of panic, right? And even from the customers, it was, let's acquire as much product as we can get, right? And so you see a number of measures that were enacted, such as allocations and certain restrictions that we provided, out there in the marketplace to make the products, stretch as far as we could. And so, now that we're starting to see states open back up, and now we can somewhat try to understand what some of those needs are, it's starting to shift. All right, and it looks different than it did a few weeks ago, right? But you still have a lot of the same demand that's occurring with certainly limited supply.
Yeah, well, I think that'd be one of the real critical issues, as you sort of alluded to earlier, is certainly there's a number of epidemiologists, that infectious disease experts, that think that we're going to see a second peak that is at least as big as what the first peak was. So I was just wondering, are you seeing your customers now ordering in anticipation of that so that they don't fear having the shortages, or the supply chains are still strained trying to catch up?
I think within certain categories, I think the supply chain is still strained, right? I think that, there you do see some opportunities out there, where you're starting to see, that the rationing strategies and the allocation strategies, are effective, right? And our manufacturers are doing a fantastic job of certainly getting product to us, throughout this time. That's where I start to see, more, I would say that the focus on diagnostic testing, really starting to, now that we have testing available, whereas at the start of this, we didn't, right? You only had certain PPE, right, that you could use, in defense of this, right? So I think that's where, what have we learned from this? What's available now as opposed to what was available, and ensuring we're taking, these products out there to market and educating them with our supplier partners. So, I definitely see more of a focus on the diagnostic testing aspect of what's available today versus at the start of this.
Well, let's hope we avoid that second peak. So, Ty, it's been great talking to you. So if people want to connect with you, how could they connect with you?
You feel free to reach out to me via email, ty.ford@henryschein.com. We've got Team Schein members all across the U.S., and so anything that we could do to help out and provide us some additional insights, would love to. And I certainly appreciate your time today, Andy. It's been great talking to you.
Yeah, it's been great to meet you, and thank you for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome, sir.